for some Bengals news. At the Growler, we got you. Hot takes, interviews from your host, Paul Dano Jr.
All right, welcome to the latest edition of the Growler. Paul Dano Jr. here with my good friend Charlie Goldsmith. Charlie, what's up, buddy?
How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for this. You know, we are going to dive into this is like the Bengals fans draft dream show is what it is. Oh, can you guys talk about offensive line for like 45 minutes, just straight, just nothing but just raw dog and guard talk? Can we do that?
As I said on the guard free agency preview show, it was a Bengals second round pick that potentially could have made or broken two Super Bowls. So here we go. We're doing a early 2026 Super Bowl preview, position to watch, second round guard in the biggest game of his life.
Yep. And I can go back and replay all the debates because it was the undercurrent debate of Chase versus Sewell was, but they're going to screw up the second round offensive line pick. That was what no one wanted to talk. Everybody wanted to make it about those two guys, but it was always like hand up. No, but the problem here is, can you trust them to get the second round line pick right? And the answer was you couldn't. And the answer was for a while, you haven't been able to. And here we are back in this spot again, one that they absolutely unequivocally, we're on a Monday morning run here. Can't get it right. Maybe this is the year. But don't listen to us about this topic. We have called in the big dogs, all right? And that is Brandon Thorn of Trench Warfare is going to join me here in a little bit. He is going to give you the full scope of all things offensive line draft, who these guys are, what the Bengals fits are. He mentioned some very interesting Bengals connections that he sees from guys that he has talked to. If you like offensive line play, and if you're a Bengals fan, I know that you wish that you could know what it looks like when it's good. Go to Trench Warfare, the Substack, subscribe, 11,000 subscribers. I mean, he is absolutely at the centerpiece of all offensive line evaluation. Great stuff. Brandon will join us here in a second. We hope that you will join us on the Tuesday after the draft. You know it, you love it. Our post-draft special on the 29th, that Tuesday, down at our great friends, BetMGM, Nation Kitchen and Bar at the Banks. Such a great venue, such a great host, such a great partner. Bengals Director of Player Personnel, Mike Potts, is going to join us, so we are pumped to be back down there again. We hope that you will come join us as well.
Have you had the new house-made cookies at Nation?
What?
Yeah.
They have house-made cookies? When did this happen?
Right? It happened. I was there for lunch a couple weeks ago, and I saw, don't forget to order a cookie, ... or 3, and I did, and they were delicious.
The place, just when you think it can't do anymore, it continues to give. So maybe we can have a full cookie party. Maybe if you show up, cookies for everyone. Maybe we can make that happen. You know, you never know when you show up at a Growler Live event what you're going to end up walking out with. I can guarantee you it will be something, and maybe it'll be a cookie. And I think that sounds pretty good. So make sure you're coming down and join us. We have tons of draft coverage coming your way over the next couple of weeks. Really excited about all of that. YouTube live shows are going to be back. We're going to be doing all of the walkouts after each draft night. So all the stuff that you love coming your way here soon. And then Big Mock Monday, next Monday. Every year we do this, and it is the ultimate way to preview. We have hit the nail on the head on the first and second round picks the last, I think, 3 years in a row now on that. James Rapine, Jeff Hobson, myself, we're going to have the whole crew together going through and predicting where we see that thing going and kind of getting to the real crux of the conversation. Love it. One of my favorite podcasts every year. So we hope to see you. That'll be next Monday. We'll have that for you. My 5-part series doing draft dives up. It is the first episode. First one is up now. The first piece is up now on The Athletic. Make sure you go check that out. Safeties and linebackers, something that Charlie and I went through last week. Okay, let's set the stage for this offensive line stuff here, Charlie. Okay, Orlando Brown Jr., Amarius Mims, Ted Karras, known quantities. starters. Karras in the last year of his contract. Brown and Mims, both, Brown with injury last year. Mims has battled injuries throughout his college career and a little bit of last year's situation. So swing tackle still in the mix, a part of this. At guard, Lucas Patrick, Cody Ford, Cordell Volson, and Jackson Kirkland, also a part of this. So
say that with a smile. And Jackson Kirkland.
I say it because you're kind of like, are we in, or is Kirkland in the mix? Should we continue to mention? I'm not giving up on Jackson Kirkland. It's in the mix. If you can make the team, like he made the team last year, people said nice things about him, he's big, then there's hope. Then you're in the mix, because if we're talking about Cody Ford and Lucas Patrick, I'm not going to say that Jackson Kirkland isn't in the mix.
Andrew Stuber out here is listening to this show and feels completely slighted. Paul, it almost feels like there's a missing piece that they should have addressed in free agency. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. Almost. You wish you weren't sitting here wondering how are they going to do this in the draft. I mentioned the draft failures. I wanted to touch on this. This is something that will be the offensive line piece on The Athletic, is coming out tomorrow. But I wanted to just quickly touch on this because I went through and decided I wanted to really get a feel for this rounds 2 through 5 failure thing. They just haven't done anything in the last, going back to, I don't know, go back as far back as you want. I went back 10 years because it felt embarrassing to continue to go back that much farther. And I just wanted to look at starts on your team by offensive linemen that you drafted in rounds 2 through 5. And what is the league doing? Because we know the Bengals have not done much. What is the league doing? The Broncos lead the way over the last 10 years with 273 starts for offensive linemen that they drafted in rounds 2 through 5. Okay. On their rookie contracts. We're not even going out over careers, just while on rookie contract, not counting anything beyond that. The Bengals have 88. Okay. The Broncos have 5 players. The Jaguars 6, 5. That's the top of this is just AFC. I wasn't going to do all the NFC. 5 or 6 players. That's the top of the mark with at least 20 plus starts. So became a starter more than a year. The Bengals have 1, and he got benched last year. Cordell Volson. That's it. Okay. The only other team down there with them, here's territory you don't want to be: Jets, Bengals, Browns, living at the bottom of every category that you want to look up amongst this group. Just nothing good happening there. And they have only selected 2 offensive linemen over a 10-year period in rounds 2 and 3. That's it. And they both busted. Okay. And so when they're not investing, they haven't invested in it. When they have, they've missed Jake Fisher, Jackson Carman. And they've gotten no production out of, rounds 4 and 5. They've tried, but it hasn't hit. That you can't live that way. But you can't live that way and expect to offset certainly the types of contracts that they have to pay now for their skill positions. This has to change. And whether that's investment, whether that's development, probably a combination of both. That to me is really the crux of what has been this offensive line issue for so long.
And that's the key, what you just said. You can't live that way. At some point, if you're going to be a good team, you need to be able to pluck and develop mid-round offensive linemen. And the Bengals' self-scouting and confidence in their own ability to do that, it's not an understatement to say shapes and creates the entire draft strategy. Are you pigeonholed in round 2? There's a nice little tier of guys in round 2 who are clean fits: Jackson, Ratledge, Savanaia, maybe even a Gray Zabel. Maybe Miles Frazier's a borderline round 2, round 3 guy. There's a nice little pocket there that you could see the Bengals saying, all right, we just got to make sure we get one of these guys. But if you do that and you feel like that's necessary to solidify your line, well, then Xavier Watts off the board, Carson Schlesinger off the board, a pocket of defensive ends in round 2 that I absolutely love. I think that pocket might actually be the best pocket in this entire draft class of any pocket at any position. We'll say goodbye to all those guys. After you get past round 2, at offensive guard, sure, there are a couple guys here or there, like maybe you can develop Fairchild, maybe Frazier's still around. Jalen Rivers, Caleb Rogers, but those are all not quite heat checks, but kind of very confident plays waiting that late to address guard with those guys' specific profiles. So where the Bengals start here, they have to start is answering a question about themselves. Do we think we can do this if we wait past round 2 to take an offensive guard?
And if they do, the first person I want to hear from is Scott Peters, because the pressure, the same way we said what happened with Al Golden, by not seeing much change and sort of a doubling down on run it back on defense, was all the pressure falling on Al Golden to do something different with the same pieces. You're saying we trust Scott Peters to be the one to be able to develop. He sees something. There's a reason we believe that he can get more out of not only the draft pick, but the guys that are currently in the room that haven't lived up to the expectations that you want or yet to be proven to do so. So when that happens, when you make, it just seems like there's just a lot of those types of bets being made on coaches, like bring in better players and an early investment. And everywhere you listen and everybody you talk to, man, they have all eyes on guard in this draft. Like they understand it. I think you can make assumptions in other places and you can talk yourself in and out of certain things. I can't talk myself out of anything that like guard has to come. And it has to come early. They don't really have any other answers. And other positions, they have other answers, I think, for the most part. And so here, though, it really feels like this is the spot of emphasis. This is where the aggression comes, and you're most pushed to not wait. Round 2 guard feeling like it does kind of feel like that honey hole spot, assuming they're not willing to go that extra mile with what's in round 1. Let's take, now that we've kind of laid it out.
Can I respond to that? Can I add something to that real quick?
Drop in one more.
I feel very confident in the Bengals using a day 2 pick at the very least at guard. An important name to keep in mind here is McKinley Jackson. What happened last year? The Bengals would have loved to have added a nose at any point over those first 2 rounds. They ended up sticking to their board, waiting to round 3 and drafted a guy in Jackson we like, but a guy who had like a 5th or a 6th round grade at the time. So that chain of events is something that I think directly translates to guard. They'd love for them to not have some similar bad luck on their draft board early in round 2 like that happened last year before there was a big drop off. And then, they like Chris Jenkins, but there were some guys higher on their board before then. They'd like guard to play out in a way where they would address it in round 2. But then in round 3, I could see them making a massive reach if they don't address guard by then, basically following McKinley Jackson 2.0.
Boy, massive reach at a guard position. This writes itself for the 2026 Super Bowl run-up, Charlie. You can already feel it. All right, on that note, nobody knows what will be a reach and what won't be a reach and who the real guys are better than this guy who has joined me pretty much every year, because we have to talk about offensive line in depth pretty much every year. Let's go to Brandon Thorn. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, great to have you here. Always appreciate it. The Brandon Thorn interview is on the YouTube page. Go and check that out down here. It could be anywhere really, but just, and tell your friends, follow us on YouTube. We like to drop extras in there all the time. We're going to have extras, including our live shows during draft weekend. That'll be YouTube only. So make sure you are subscribing and getting the notifications and all of that stuff on YouTube, and keep an eye out for that. Okay. Now, let's flip it forward. Let's just say you have done the right thing. You've gone and listened to Brandon Thorn, and now you come back, and we're going to talk a little bit about the state of things. All right, Charlie. I thought really interesting stuff from Brandon. What stood out to you?
It makes me feel pretty good about the mock draft I have going on in my head right now, which is one of the premier defensive players in round 1. And then Donovan Jackson in round 2. He made a point to go out of his way to really praise the skill set that he brings to the table. He has the emergency tackle flex, but he's really worked his way into this round 2 conversations in a pretty high way with what he showed at guard. Pedigree, experience, length, power, trust from the coaching staff, his ability to stonewall guys. Like the fact that he was mentioned specifically as a guy who would be a fit for the Bengals. Of course, Brandon Thorn's way light years ahead of me on this kind of stuff, but it lines up with what I've seen. It lines up with the direction I expect the Bengals to go. And I was going through a pocket of round 2 guys that they all do, make some sense. Him stressing that name in particular definitely caught my eye.
Yeah, and I mean, look at somebody like Dane Brugler just has him listed as a tackle and sees tackle as his spot in the NFL based off stuff that he saw. I mean, so the flex there is real. We know how important that would be when you consider that they have two shots that they need to take there. You know, I thought the stuff at the end about the strike technique specifically mentioned Brandon Sheriff. I did not set that up. That was that was just Brandon pointing that out, and then you hear a couple other names. I wonder, Charles Grant, somebody who mentioned using the strike technique. I wonder how much of those guys that are very advanced, maybe in Scott Peters' technique, this MMA background strike technique stuff, would be the late round pinpoint of like, hey, this is where we can find an advantage of somebody that can hit the ground running quicker. I've seen him do my stuff. He knows it. And not everybody is using that. Now, it is pervasive across the league at this point. It's not like it's some unknown quantity, but I mean, it is his thing. And so I wonder if there's a thought that let's lean into that, and maybe that's where we can find a gem later on in the draft. I thought that was an interesting note, and Grant, having been in for a visit, certainly connects some dots there.
Another Bengals historical draft comparison from a different position that kind of lines up here is like what they did in 2020 at linebacker, and they tripled up in that case. And so, kind of what's the late round swing at line, or on the offensive line going to be in an ideal world for me? That's an offensive tackle, swing tackle option with maybe a bit of projection, enough at guard to be able to throw him in there, or maybe it's just a true traits upside guy. Like maybe they take a guard early and then like Marcus and Bo or Fairchild's around later, and you hope that Peters can coach him up or something like that. Like, who is almost the Marcus Bailey of this draft class going to be? That being kind of the Scott Peters heat check. Like, that to me is a really interesting sequence to keep an eye out on for eye out for on day 3.
They better have picks. I mean, I just, again, when we go back to how many things they need to do, there's just only so many picks. There's only 6 picks. And, they would love to move back, and we've discussed those concepts, but it just feels like if you're going to start going there, I do think the double up is an interesting conversation piece, specifically an early double up. If you saw, I wouldn't be surprised to see a round 2 and a round 4, a circle back on a guard tackle combo person, and maybe you get the other person who's more of a center guard combo person who could potentially be a future answer of the Ted Karras conversation if Matt Lee isn't a guy or whatever. Like, more flex the better. You pretty much have to be at this point, and so many of these guys are like that. Like, when you go down this list, it's amazing how few. It's a rarity to see the guy who's like guard only or tackle only. It's just this whole draft, because in the college game is like that. This whole draft is full of guys that have kind of done everything, that have done multiple spots. I mean, Grace Abel's 5 positions across the front. Like, and you feel comfortable with all that you have this everywhere. And I think when you have that, just throwing more bodies at the problem isn't a bad thing. I don't know that I have a huge problem with that if they feel like they have the right guys in the right fit.
Something I find interesting about Dane is, and I'd be curious to ask him this one day, I feel like he's the best in the business. I think he's very, like, if there's any doubt about whether a guy's a tackle, he puts them at guard, which, like, there are a lot of guys who played tackle in college who he lists as guard, which makes, it's a fun wrinkle, I think, in the beast. But so then kind of circling back through that, I did make a point to go through all of the guys he listed as tackles with guard experience, because that might be a subsection of guys who actually could be a fine enough swing tackle, but also be able to compete for that guard spot. And there were a few like Jack Nelson, Branson Taylor, Ajanai Cornelius. Like, there are those day 3 guys who could, again, be that Marcus Bailey in a double up situation, specifically Taylor, who's coming off an injury. I kind of wrote my notes. He has Matt Lee vibes on the outside. I do like the idea of circling back, and I'd even prioritize circling back on the offensive line over like getting that blocking tight end that they might have been interested in, adding another corner. I guess they'll have to add a running back, but maybe drafting 2 defensive tackles. They need help on the offensive line, and I'm a proponent of investing more resources with multiple picks there.
And if you go back to tackle, and this is the failed experiment of 2021 of the guard, the traitsy tackle in round 4, and the heat check pick with Trey Hill in round 6. those all fail. It was historically bad, right? We know that, but you could see them, you could see something similar in what we're kind of talking about here. You got to try it, but the uncertainty in 2 years, when you've gone through the next 2 years of Orlando Brown Jr., what's your answer at tackle? They're probably not going to want to pay him, but you're thinking about that. Because if you take the 4th round developmental guy, the idea being in 3 years, he's a starting tackle in this league. And, and when you're thinking about, and then you start thinking about where you're going with both of those, but you got to always be thinking about the future when it's so hard to find them. You want to have somebody in the pipeline who this year could be a developmental guy. The next year, he could be your swing tackle. And the year after that, maybe he could be the guy where you could see that progression. That comes in round 4. That comes, with a guy who's got all the traits, and you give him to Scott Peters. Like that is, to me, a big part of this too. When you think about what that projection looks like, it's easy to whiff there, but you got to take those chances because they're valuable.
You see, I'd love that. Just like I'd love to add a day 2 running back for this Bengals team, or like I'd love to add, another corner to challenge. But I think that is margin for error that they haven't allowed themselves to have based on how they've built this room. Like Kelvin Banks is a great example. Sure, he can play tackle, but because of the traits we know the Bengals love at left tackle, like, again, he's a 1st-round prospect. I don't think he's a fit for the Bengals as their left tackle of the future. I think he could be their left guard of the future. But and same with Donovan Jackson. I don't see guys here who would really solve that guard now, tackle later quandary because of how they prioritize the offensive tackle spot, and then and really the size there and the traits there. And then from a developmental standpoint, like, I don't know that I can afford to use a 4th round pick on a tackle or even a guard like even a Fairchild or an Mbo who could develop later, because you need a guy who could step in right now and immediately be your best option. Like, I don't know that they have that luxury to go the truly developmental route because of the snaps they need now. If they wanted to go the developmental route, they should have been more aggressive in free agency, allowing them the flexibility to do that. This is just where they find themselves again pigeonholed on the offensive line.
Yeah, without adding picks, that becomes hard to do. The one other thing is I want to quiz you, Charlie. Are you ready? Okay.
Yep.
Last year, how many offensive linemen took a snap last year in the NFL, do you think, that were at least 6'7" and 315 pounds? How many do you think?
I know this. It was like,
Do you know this?
like 4. It was like 4, and 3 of them played for the Bengals. It was something like
No,
that.
well, no. One, I'm not doing start. One snap, literally played and on offense in the league. So I'm not even counting starting. Yeah, you're right. It gets egregious when you get into starting. But how many do you think? Just it's a random.
10.
It's kind of a hard one. 33.
10.
33.
It's more than I thought.
33 took a single snap. 5 of them were for the Bengals. No team had more than 3. This is it. This is the profile. Now, does Scott Peters come in and the first thing he says is, why is everybody 6'8", 340? Like, is that,
I want to be the biggest
know.
guy in this room.
Right. Why? Maybe that is the first thing that he says is, why does everybody have to look like this? But I just think it's notable when you do that and we start talking about the tackle fits and who that could be. You go down that there's not last year there were lots of those guys, not lots, but a decent amount of those guys for a normal draft, especially at the top. There really aren't any amongst the tackles at the top this year. You got to go. I guess you have, the kid from Minnesota, Ursary, 6'6", 331, but he's not. I mean, he's not tall enough.
And he's raw.
His arms 30. Yeah, and he's raw. Like, again, but he's not up there. Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College is 6'8", 316. Hello, Bengals, right? Like, so if you're looking at sleepers, you're looking at some of these guys that fit what they have more than anything else, where they would feel like drop him in. He can learn from all the people that have very similar body types and styles. He's one that stands out there. You have, let's see, there. When then you get a little bit further down, Carson Vinson from Alabama A&M, Holland Pierce from Rutgers. These are guys that Dane has in the 5th round range. So Jalen Travis from Iowa State, who's 6'8", 340. Jack Nelson from Wisconsin. These are all 5th, 6th round guys. If you're looking for names that would say, oh, he looks like a Bengals tackle, he could be the next Andrew Stuber, right? Maybe he hopes not.
But here's
But
so like let me ask you this as a question. Like Ozzie, guy who is a tackle, that would then be your third round pick. So like in that mock or in that draft, then say you'd be going defense. You'd either be going like defense Ratledge, Ozzie, or you'd be going like linebacker safety Ozzie. So then like Ozzie would be your guy at guard, and there's so much projection there. Like, would you feel comfortable enough doing that, having him in the third round?
no,
Be your guard? Yeah.
No, not when when you consider what else they need to do. So you're right. I mean, you end up with one of these guys that are absolute total projection dart throws. And I just think that becomes an interesting conversation in the draft room when it's round 5 and they're like, look, we could take advantage of we need a running back. We could take advantage of the depth at running back. We could take advantage of the depth on the defensive line. Let's get another pass rusher in here. Let's get another linebacker. Let's take a second swing at that. All of these needs that we know, maybe there's going to be something they haven't taken yet. And then to be like, oh, let's go swing tackle. That becomes a risky thing, but they also don't have a swing tackle. And I guess you're counting Cody Ford and Jackson Kirkland in that mix as part of your swing tackles. And so it's a conversation that at some point you got to start to have there. What is happening? Why have they not? And maybe they miss, and we see a Jedrick Wills who's sitting there in free agency who has experience with Scott Peters, or one of these free agents that you do a Band-Aid swing tackle for a year that are sitting there waiting for the draft to happen. Maybe that's what comes next.
At swing tackle, like once you get, so like I just kind of made my point that I think third round's too rich for them to go for the swing tackle position. Then once you go into day 3, like you're probably getting better 20-25 snaps at swing tackle from Cody Ford, as limited as he is, as opposed to like a 4th round pick. I also think it's important to circle back to the round 1 guys. Like to me, those feel like almost, not that punting's bad, shout out Ryan Rico. They almost feel like a good Ryan Rico punt, but still a punt. If everything you'd want in terms of a defensive playmaker is off the board, then all right, Kelvin Banks or Tyler Booker. But neither one of those guys to me either screams, middle of the first round guard because of the limitations and the flaws in their game. With Banks, it's kind of the lack of overpowering finish. With Booker, it's the lack of space, mobility, flexibility. Like for me, if I'm drafting a guard in round 1 and going against that, positional value model, I need a perfect guard. It doesn't, to me, those guys don't have it. So I'm only going in that direction. If like, Starks and Rory and Campbell and Harmon and all those guys are off the board. So then, and I just talked about the back end of this class. So now we're like funneling ourselves closer and closer to guard or round 2 guard. Like, we're going at it from both sides. And I think we're landing there pretty securely.
Yep. I think that's the fit. I said last week with Jay, I said, if I was making a bet on a single position taken, I would say round 5 running back. I'm also going to add round 2 guard in there at this point. Like it just feels like it does. It puts itself right into that honey hole right now. Now, a trade back in round 1, if they could find someone that wanted to come up for whatever, changes the dynamic. And you love Tyler Booker at 23, or whatever, and you love so many guys you like a lot more there when you now have the extra pick to try to do some of the things that we just talked about. And maybe that becomes the answer. But I'm with you too. And you could kind of hear it in Brandon's voice earlier, like, 17 on Tyler Booker. I don't care if he plays like a Bengal and he's the ultimate Bengals fit. It doesn't, he's not a perfect prospect. And if you're taking that position there, you kind of want him to feel like the perfect guard, and he's not. He's a worthwhile investment and a guy who would be no doubt starting day 1 without any conversation. And that means something. But yeah, you're right. It does sort of feel, and I just know for me, and I've said this a bunch as we've done all these mocks and put it together, I come back to Ratledge over and over and over again because of the connection with Mims, the chemistry already there with Mims, the character stuff we saw. We talked about this in the Trends episode with Jay last week, like the stuff you read when you read Dane. Like he's just a guy that everybody loves. He lifts all boats. Like he's willing to do anything. He's kind of just got everything you want, and he will be able to comfortably step in and play right next to your right tackle because he's done it before. That I just can't get past that. And the fact that he should be there at 49, it just keeps going back there for me.
I wrote in my notes on Ratledge, clean.
Yeah.
Now, so like, I'll kind of circle back to here too. Like the difference between Banks and Booker, and then Jackson, Ratledge, Savanea, Zabel, even Frazier, that gap to me is much smaller than the gap between Derek Harmon and Walter Nolan, Shamar Turner, Darius Alexander, the round 2 defensive tackles. The gap at guard is much smaller between Jahad Campbell and Carson Schwessinger, or Malachi Starks at safety and Xavier Watts. So again, it lines up here very well. Ratledge has the clean fit. Like we saw defensive tackle last year, they probably won't get to make the choice. Every team needs guard help. It's just hoping that the name that you're staring at for a long time, shout out Logan Wilson, doesn't fall off the board. Like there was that run at defensive tackle last year. I do see enough guys, again, even with a Miles Frazier on the low end, like I'd be fine with a reach in the second round for him, with the skill set and the fit that he has. You know, I'll take Jackson over Ratledge, but he's great. 7A is great. They're very Bengals style players. Now, so are the defensive ends who you'd be missing out on in the second round. But again, this is the boat they've cast with how they approach free agency.
Yep. I'm with you on that. You got it. You just want to get somebody out of that top group to help make you feel like you are protecting the franchise. And that's kind of where we end up again. We will be talking about this pick and more with the guy who's going to be at the tip of the spear with it, Mike Potts, Bengals director of college scouting, as we do every year. We'll be doing that at BetMGM, Nation Kitchen and Bar, down at the Banks on the Tuesday after draft weekend. That's the 29th. Excited you can do that. And then go on, Charlie, come on down, do some Reds talk before the Reds game. If you're looking for a spot to go like before the Reds game, if you're going to go watch Luis Castillo on Tuesday or whatever, listen to Power Stacks on your way down with Goldsmith and Giesenslaw, and then come down, have a cookie, right? Have a quesadilla burger, do that, have a delicious meal down at Nation, make a bet at BetMGM, head on into the game, enjoy a tilt. I mean, you can't beat it. A great spot, and make sure you're listening to Power Stacks, everybody. The episodes have been awesome. I've been learning so much, and I'm enjoying. It's like the best way for me to keep up with everything that's going on if I can't watch every single game. Charlie, you guys are crushing it. And really, the deep dive into the smell, what a good pizza smells like last week. It was kind of, I appreciated your going full, using every sense in your reporting notebook last week, because it made me hungry. And also just incredible detail.
I have one more thing to wrap up this conversation. It is more on the guards point. The greatest episode in Drake and Josh history. The high school football team needs help on the interior of the offensive line, and incredible shenanigans ensue. One of my favorite television episodes of all time.
Okay. Send me a link to that, and I will. I'll go make sure I go check that one out. I've been catching up. I've been watching a lot. I've been binging it. I go from tape. I go from offensive line tape, running back tape, right over to Drake and Josh, and make sure that I'm staying with it.
It's all
Josh
about
and
guards,
Drake, as I like it to be. It's all about.
That's right.
Send me the link. All right. Appreciate it. We will be back. Jay and I will be here on Wednesday. We'll keep diving into. We're going to go into the defensive line. There, Dane Brugler will be our guest on Wednesday, so make sure you come check back on that as we go. I'm gonna find his favorite nuggets that he unearthed in The Beast, which if you don't have yet, you should have your hands on it. All right. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a good one.